Let's see. Okay, I think that's probably all of them. Checking to make sure that stuff's coming through. Okay, I think that's it. So I wasn't going to be streaming today. I did go on vacation over the weekend, which was awesome. We went down to Oregon and got to have like a 4 day long weekend. So I thought that I would probably be late. Hello from Twitter. First time here from Mexico. Awesome. Yeah, I thought I was going to not be streaming today because I thought that I'd be getting home pretty late from vacation. So turns out we came back early. I just saw my sister joined. Hi, Kate. This is your brother's live stream. Don't mess it up. No pressure. Yeah, so I thought we were going to be getting home kind of late, so I figured I'd cancel this, and then it turns out we got home a lot earlier than I thought, so I figured I will do the typical stream, so this will be AMA format. I moved it up about 30 minutes as well because I figured, based on some feedback from LinkedIn, people were suggesting that they do want to see me go through some articles and stuff. So I'm probably going to pull up Reddit for the second half of this and just start going through posts and giving some commentary on them. And of course, if you guys are on the stream and watching it live, not the recorded version, if you have stuff that you want me to go over, send it over. I got to check on a different screen to make sure it's safe for work kind of thing. But if it's, different posts and stuff that you want feedback on or hear my thoughts, I'm happy to go over that. So like normal though, for these streams, please do ask away. I am watching chat across three enormous monitors to make sure I can see anything that's coming in. So I do like making sure on these streams that if you guys have questions that I'm there to answer them. So otherwise, this is it's YouTube content, right? So I do want to make sure that I can spend the time answering what's top of mind for you. So the topic for this week, and again, you can ask questions about literally anything you want related to software engineering. But the topic that I wrote about at the end of last week for my newsletter was about retrospection. And I think this is a really important topic. And perhaps depending on the teams and stuff that you're on for development, you might be exposed to this kind of thing because, your teams have adopted, say, like air quotes here, like an agile approach to software development. Sometimes it's not even agile. And people slap in retrospectives, which is good. I think retrospectives in general are good. So I do want to talk about what retrospection is, why I think it's valuable. And then in my newsletter, I was writing about actionable things that you can do for retrospection on your teams. So I'll give you some examples of how I've leveraged them and why they've been beneficial. And then how you can use retrospection for yourself. Because the concepts are similar, right? We were going to talk about how retrospection is good for continuous improvement on teams, but it's not just limited to teams because you can apply these concepts to your own personal growth. So that will be the focus. Then, like I said, we'll jump over to Reddit and or be answering anything you guys want to go over. So with that said, what is retrospection? It's a fancy word. Kind of sounds like inspection, reflection, and it's a little bit of both. So the idea with retrospection is that you're going to reflect on a period of time and do some introspection for that period and kind of think about things critically, right? So I like trying to describe it as thinking about what went well, what didn't go well, and trying to drive towards things that you want to experiment with respect to change. And in my personal opinion, this is really what drives continuous improvement. It's sort of it's like an official process that you might put in place. And I'm going to say official process pretty loosely, but it's something that you put in place to be able to work with your team to reflect on a period of time to see how things are going. And the important part here is that it's not just about seeing how things went. You don't just want to stop and write down notes on like how things went and say, good, we got the notes, let's move on so we can do it again next time, right? That's not what it's about. That's part of it, right? And it's a small part because you want to be able to go over what you did and talk about what went well and what didn't, but you don't want to stop there because if you just stop there, then you're not doing any better next time. Right? So with retrospection, what we want to do is think critically about how things went so that we can start asking questions and challenging ourselves and seeing what can we do better next time? So hopefully that makes sense. If as I start to go through this, especially if you're joining as this stream is going on, if you're hearing me talk about retrospectives and retrospection, if you're like, I still don't get it, could you explain it? I'm happy to go back over the definition. I think for most people, especially if you are already employed as a software engineer, this concept is probably familiar already. But I want to make sure for new folks that aren't totally familiar with this that we can spend the time to make sure that you do understand it, because you may very well be working at places that don't do retrospectives, and it's not for me to say if that's right or wrong, but if you're hearing me talk through this and where you work does not use a retrospection or do some type of retrospective, this might be something that you want to propose and say, hey, like this seems like a cool thing, could we try it? Because that's going to be the basis for continuous improvement. So I've said it a couple times. I've been mentioning continuous improvement, right? Like, so what is continuous improvement? Nick's saying it. Maybe it's a cool thing. Maybe we do it already. Maybe we don't do it and we should do it. What does it mean? So I think most folks are probably familiar with hearing about agile software development. So I have sort of stopped saying agile software development. And I think it's because it's just like, I don't know, it's almost becoming like a negative phrase in software engineering. Used to be like, especially when I was getting started, it was like, oh, waterfall is the worst. Like, we don't say waterfall. If you're doing waterfall, it's the end of the world. And like everything has to be agile. So I've been in industry now for 12 years plus another 2 years on top of that for internships, which spanned 5 years. So in total, like the time that I have been in the workforce spans a 17-year period. So it's been a while. And over those 17 years, what I've seen is, and this is just my experience, so this is obviously biased, right? But I've seen this period where it was like, I'm joining the software engineering workforce when everyone's saying like waterfall is bad, you got to do agile things. So that's like primarily Scrum is one of the ways you can do that. Kanban is another popular one that was, being discussed a lot when I was doing, development. Extreme programming, I had a little bit of exposure. This sounds pretty cool, right? XP, extreme programming. A little bit of exposure to that early on. But the idea was just that we want to do agile software development, and that way we get a quick feedback loop. But this is over that 17-year period, what everyone's talking about doing. Like, this is the way to do it. Waterfall bad, agile good. Hello, Steve from Germany on YouTube. Good to see you here. So that's taken in my, like, from my perspective on social media, seeing people talk about this kind of stuff, especially over the last year, I'm seeing a lot of people saying, you know what, agile failed, agile sucks, it's no good. And I promise I'm going to bring this back to retrospectives in just a moment, but I'm hearing this a lot. And when I see people talking about it this way, saying agile has failed, and then I hear them describe it, and I think what I'm hearing a lot of is like the implementation of agile, again, agile with air quotes, at a lot of places is truly just not agile. It's like a process heavy, which is the opposite of agile, by the way. It's a process heavy implementation of a way to work. And then it's labeled agile. And then I would say, yeah, like I would totally agree if you're saying this is failing. Yes, that probably does not work well in a lot of places. It becomes very prescriptive. It's very rigid, right? And it's literally going against the Agile Manifesto of saying people over process, right? That's like one of the tenets of it. So a lot of the time when I'm hearing people say Agile has failed, then they describe how it's failing. I'm going, well, you're describing something that really isn't Agile. So instead of just debating this kind of thing and trying to get into the details and the nuance aspects of like what is and what is not Agile, I go, you know what, like I actually don't care. I don't want to waste my time debating, which way or which process you follow, because I just genuinely don't care, and I don't think it matters, because like a lot of things I'll talk about in software engineering, there's pros and cons to everything, right? Typical it depends, right? We all say it as software engineers, but it depends. So there isn't one best way to go approach building software. But what I like to do, and what I think can give us sort of the best version of all of these things, is just framing things as continuous improvement. So instead of saying we do strictly waterfall software design, or we are an agile software shop there and we must do Kanban, and here's exactly how Kanban looks. You have to follow our exact Kanban process. I'm just kind of saying this sarcastically, right? Like, because if you're following an exact process, it's very strict, it's really not agile by definition. So when we start going down this path, I don't like talking about things that way. I just like saying continuous improvement. And that means that if you are working on a team that is focused on continuously improving, you will, over periods of time, maybe have something that happens to look more waterfall. And as you are continuously improving with the team, it might start shifting to be maybe a little bit more agile, right? You might have to adapt to things, and you're like, hey, look, we need to build in the ability to be a little bit more dynamic, have more feedback. So some of the waterfall aspects aren't really working anymore. And you keep thinking about how to improve continuously. And therefore, your goal is not how do we make it more specifically Kanban or more specifically Scrum or anything. Your goal is not to move specifically towards that. Your goal is just to get better. And the reason I like doing this on software engineering teams is because I have seen that even with a consistent team, your ideal state is not fixed. I've seen it with a fixed team, and you start to shift what the team is building, right? You fix all the other variables except what the team is building. Now, all of a sudden, the way that team operates may need to shift to be more effective. And I've seen it the other way, where you keep, in place, you fix what the team is working on. It's very understandable work. It's very known. You can actually estimate it very well. You keep those things fixed, and you change the team members. The team will need to adapt their processes, how they work, to become more optimal, because you have variables changing. So if no variable is changing ever, then sure, your team may be able to kind of look at what they're doing and say, we can optimize this, let's keep moving in some direction. But regardless, in all of these kind of generalized examples that I'm giving you, the goal is continuous improvement at the end of the day. So if you, again, like the meta principle here is that step back, instead of saying we must do one of these things, Kanban, Scrum, Waterfall, there's a million of them, right? Instead of saying we do one of these things, I like to say we focus on continuous improvement. Now, bringing this all back to retrospectives, generally in agile software development, you have some opportunity, depending on the process that you're following, and I'm saying process here because that's generally how it gets implemented, right? Some guiding principles. You will have some type of ceremony with the team that's called a retrospective, and it allows you to reflect on the period. Period here can change from team to team, your implementation of the process that you're following, right? So if we're talking about sprints, even in Kanban, I've seen like doing, every 2 weeks or something, we still just want to put a line in the sand to say, in 2 weeks or 1 week or 3 weeks, whatever that time frame is, we just want to make sure that we can circle back and reflect on how things are going. So again, regardless of the process you follow, let's put some time frame in place where we can circle back and say, how are things going? So this is why I think retrospectives are valuable across any type of software development, is because you can put them in place regardless of what you're following. And I generally recommend, again, this is going to change from team to team, I like doing about 2 weeks to reflect on things. If your sprint or whatever cadence you're following happens to be much longer than 2 weeks in the first place. For example, my previous team that I was on had 1 month long sprints. Because things moved at that pace, we would do our retrospectives every month, just as an example. I like 2 weeks. It's about enough time, depending on, still generalizing here, it's about enough time to try something out, get a feel for it, and then talk about it next time. And sometimes you need more time, sometimes right away, but roughly 2 weeks is a pretty good fit. Okay, so this is framing up what retrospection is, what a retrospective might look like on a team, but I want to start going into more detail on that. So again, if you're just joining the stream, please feel free to ask questions about this kind of thing, or if as I'm talking, you're thinking about how your team is using retrospectives and you're like, hey, what about this? What about that? Drop it in the chat. I'm happy to engage and try to navigate some of that with you. But I'm going to start going into how we can leverage retrospectives on teams more specifically. And I want to try offering up some actionable advice. And when I say actionable advice, I don't mean go follow this exactly. I mean, you should be asking these questions, because the advice is kind of think about this, and maybe you want to put something in place that does this one way or the other. So hopefully that makes sense. And I need a sip of water, so I don't want to lose my voice from blabbing. Okay, I'm just gonna kind of scroll through my newsletter while I go through this. So I actually already talked about one of the first things was setting a cadence. And I think the cadence is important. Like I said, having enough time to try things out, right? Because just to give you a couple of examples, if the cadence is too short and in your retrospective, you say, we want to try doing something different, and your cadence is too short, you don't have enough time to really measure the result. And every time you meet and talk about the result of what you tried, you might go, yeah, not enough time. And then you kind of give up on it, like, oh, like it's just not really working, or we haven't seen a change. Let's just forget about it, right? So if it's too short, that kind of thing can happen where it feels like running experiments are a waste of time because it's just never enough time to measure it properly. Now, conversely, if they're too long, I hope that teams don't fall into a trap of saying, we're going to try things and we're going to try it for the next 3 months. If you know, like a week into it, that it's just not good and people on the team are like, man, this really sucks, we should change this, please don't wait the entire time. Like, that's a bit of an anti-pattern here. So come up with a good cadence, talk about this on the team. And what's kind of cool about this is in your retrospectives, this can be one of the first things, if you're just starting them out, you can talk about this. This could be one of the first experiments you run. And the next time you have a retrospective, you can talk about the cadence again. And I'm going to get into some ways that you can look at doing changes or keeping things as we go through this. So the next part is that you want to leverage retrospectives. I kind of hinted at this, to run experiments on the team. And when I say experiments, I mean, this can be like range from all sorts of things, right? I've done live streams about and newsletter articles on code review processes. So you could have a conversation with your team about, hey, next time, over the next sprint, again, whatever cadence, whatever you want to label it, over the next period of time, we want to make sure that anyone who's doing a code review, we're going to follow this approach of, ping in the chat, make sure that you can engage the reviewers just as a nudge. And, we're going to try to close off code reviews. This is a second experiment within, 48 hours. All code reviews cannot live longer than 48 hours. So we need to make sure we're on top of them, right? You might try this as an experiment. I'm just making these up. And that's sort of like a process style experiment. You could run, this is a little meta, but you could run experiments about your retrospective. So we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the format of your retrospective, you could try something out in the next retro. You might pre-plan some topics to go over. You might change literally the format of how it's organized. So those are some options. You could, I'm just trying to think of these off the top of my head. You could say like, hey, we're experiencing a lot of problems with our build infrastructure, right? So what we're going to do is make sure that we can raise awareness over the next period of time to see if we can get some action taken. And this might not be something that your team owns, right? Your team doesn't own the implementation of this change, but you're taking an action out of the retrospective to identify a pain point and say, we need to go socialize this with the owning team, right? So you can use the retro to identify things that maybe your team doesn't own, but you need to go take action on. So I'm talking about experiments here, but this might be something that comes up where you're like, hey, you know what? Like, this is a pain point for us, but we don't really own this. Like, we should go raise awareness, see if someone can take care of it. But the point is that you're talking about these things and identifying pain points. So experiments are really awesome because if we back up from just the retro specifically, I've talked about this a lot, other people do as well. But we talk about having like an environment that's safe to fail. And failure is, I mean, as backwards as it sounds, like failure is like one of the best ways that we learn. We need to be able to have an environment that's safe to fail so that we can try things. We can think outside of the box a little bit. We can learn from our failures and our mistakes. But if we have the exact opposite environment where we're punished if we fail, we're too scared to try anything, your innovation becomes completely crippled because no one will take any chances, right? So if you have an environment where you can try things, you want to make sure that you're not just, going overboard and say everything we're going to try, and like you're not thinking about, the fallout that can happen from it. It's a little extreme, right? We don't want to go too far that way, but you want to make sure you're like, hey, we should be able to try this and see if it's better. Here's how we'll know. And here's how we'll know very quickly if it's not. Put some safeguards in place and say, let's go try it. So I think experimentation is very important. That's how we can start to evolve as teams and say like, hey, you know what? That did actually work. Maybe it worked and you want to, continue that experiment. Let's try going a little bit further with it. Maybe it worked and you're like, but if we go any further, or maybe even at this point, it's a little bit overboard. Like if we try this going forward, but pump the brakes a little bit on it, maybe that's a sweet spot, but we should talk about it again next time. Right? So experiments are a critical part of this. It's, in my opinion, one of the best things that you can be getting out of your retrospective is just things to try different. Another sort of action that I want you to take away from this is, again, it's not a prescription. It's something to think about. It's a topic. So I want you to think, if you have retrospectives, I want you to think about what that looks like. What kind of process are you following? How is it set up? If it's virtual, like how are people communicating? How are you getting your thoughts together? How are you following up on ideas, ownership that way? If you're not doing retrospectives, right? Maybe you could be taking a bunch of notes as you're going through this, a couple of takeaways, right? Like when I'm trying to highlight these actions for you, these are things I want you to think about. But I want you to think about all these things, and then when you try to implement a retrospective, or if you're trying to think about enhancing it, I want you to think about the format. And what I mean by the format is like, if every time you go to have a retrospective, it just feels like it's a completely different experience because either who's moderating it is just random, or you're getting on a call sometimes, or other times it's in person, or just, if it feels very randomized, I think that can be maybe a little bit too disruptive. So again, you can evolve these things, but I think it's important to set expectations about what that retrospective looks like going into it. And the reason that I think this is important, and it's not something that a lot of people think about unless you are, I mean, some people absolutely are, have awareness of this type of thing, but if you're a team lead or engineering manager kind of thing, you do try to think about like people first, and not just like, what is this process or event we're doing and what's the outcome of it? When you start to think about people first, something that a lot of people don't realize is like communication styles are very, very different, right? So you might have very introverted people, and if you put them in a room to go talk about some of these topics, they might go, I have lots of great ideas, but I'm not comfortable just like thinking about them on the spot. Or I want to put them down, but unless I have some support, I'm too nervous to speak up about it because it's too uncomfortable. And it's a shame if you set up a retrospective in a way that doesn't really support these people, right? Because they might have great ideas. And you do want to encourage people to have a safe place to share them. But I think the format that you take on is important. So I just encourage you to talk with your team and kind of reflect on this part about what format is valuable here. So on this topic, there's sort of two ways, and there's many, many ways you can do this, but two ways that I've really liked doing, like sort of the generalized framework for a retrospective. And the first one that I'm going to talk about is called like, wish, wonder. And it's very similar to the next one I'll talk about. The names are slightly different. It's just slightly different framing overall, but same idea. So with like, wish, wonder, what people are able to do is talk about things from the past period in this reflection, this retrospective. I like these things, right? So the experiments that you were trying, talk about those. What did you like about them, right? You want to write down the topics of the things that you liked. In terms of actual format this follows, if you were in the office, traditionally how this was done was like with sticky notes or post-it notes. People would write like literally I like, and then write a little blurb about it, and they'd put a post-it note up on a board somewhere. And there's digital tools that can do this. You can take the concepts and apply it differently, but this is sort of high level view. Someone might go, you might have a moderator that's trying to organize some of these thoughts as they're getting put on the board so they can kind of cluster them. It makes it a little bit easier to go through as we talk about this. But you would literally be saying, I like the experiment. Maybe someone joined the team and you're kind of feeling some pressure relieved from having their support on the team, or something else that was unplanned for came up, right? Maybe something that is just good that has been going on. You want to talk about like the positive things. I like these things. And this is an opportunity, again, when we go to talk about them as a team, these are the things that collectively we like what's going on here. So that's the I like. The I wish is things generally that aren't you, like they're not going so well, or you're proposing things to maybe drive some improvements, right? So you might be experiencing some friction, right? Let's bring up the code review example again. I wish we could close off code reviews within 48 hours. I wish that when I put up a pull request that I wasn't getting comments about white space, right? These are generally pain points, and sometimes you have to be careful that we don't just sound like we're complaining about these things. Now, when you write it on a post-it note, maybe it comes across that way, but when we go to talk about these things on a team, we do want to make sure that we're coming up with solutions. So that's I wish. And then I wonder is generally like more kind of out there experiments. Like I wonder if we were to go change, what's a good one for Kanban? We tried things like this, like a work in progress limit. There's a weird beeping sound coming from my room somewhere. On Kanban, if you're not familiar with Kanban, you can have this concept of a WIP limit, WIP, work in progress limit. And what it might mean is that for the different states that work can exist in, you limit how many people can be doing that. And to give you a really interesting example, if you had 5 developers on a team, so 5 people that are normally writing code, if you set a WIP limit to work that could be in the state of like someone developing it, you set that to 3, right? You can only have 3 of those work items in progress at the same time. And it could force, like by your process, could force engineers to pair up and work on them. So again, just to say that again, if you have 5 software developers on a team and your WIP limit was set to 3 for the number of work items that could be in progress to being developed, that could get you to literally force people to pair up and work through things because that limit is set in place. So one wonder that you might have in the I like, wish, wonder strategy is you could say, I wonder if we set our WIP limit to this, if we would have this type of outcome. And that might be an experiment that your team agrees to go try. Right? So the wonders are really about, framing up some of these more out there experiments. Now, before I explain the other one that's very similar, what you do with these, like I said, is you put these notes either on a virtual board, a physical board, organize them, talk through them. I do highly recommend the people that wrote them discuss them, because this is where you can get into a state of being like, someone wrote like, I wish we didn't have such a crappy build system. And then it's, oh, who wrote that and wants to talk about it? And no one puts up their hand. Like it's kind of just passive aggressive and kind of crappy. So like maybe don't do that. It's not really it's not really productive, but again, you want to make sure there's an environment where people feel like comfortable to be able to talk about these things. So you go through them and then you would come up with I would recommend some actions that you want to take and try out. Now, if you go try running 50 experiments over the next period, how do you know what's really working? Right? I don't want to say like you can only run 2 experiments or one experiment singular. But it's something to think about. Maybe you do want to say literally, here's a bunch of experiments we could go try, but we're only going to try one at a time. That way, you know, if there's, fewer variables changing, like this thing was good. Maybe. Or maybe you're looking at the list of experiments at the end of the conversation. You go, you know what? There's a couple things here that are unrelated. We think that we could try these, in parallel. Great, go do it. That's for you to discuss with your team. It's a great thing to have a retrospective on. Try it out. Try different things. But you go, take some actions and follow up on them. And hopefully over the next period, you've been able to go try these things out. The other format, aside from like, wish, wonder, that I like is start, stop, continue. It's very, very similar. Start, we're going to start some type of experiment. We're going to try something out. Stop is that we have an experiment going or just some way of working, something we're doing. We want to stop doing this. And continue is that we are doing something, it's going well, we should keep it going. This one's a little bit more straightforward in my opinion. Again, it's something to discuss in the team. Sometimes I think the like, wish, wonder part gets people to be a little bit more creative. But also I've seen people go, kind of debating, well, that should be a like, or that should be a wish, or that should be a wonder. And sometimes you can change your framing of what you're going after to fit into different categories. So people sometimes debate that a little bit too much. And it's like, if you just went with start, stop, continue, it might be a little bit more straightforward. So different things you can try there, but the concepts are very much the same. You want to be trying out different experiments. Okay, hopefully that makes sense, but this is something you should discuss with your team to see what works, and you can always change it for next time. The last thing that I want to mention in the team section is I think it's an uncomfortable thing, and I do recommend that people lean into this because your team is the best group of people you could do this with. I do think an engineering manager plays a big responsibility in making sure that this can happen effectively, but I think it's being able to have heated debates. And I think it's important to be able to have conversations with your team where people aren't just violently agreeing, right? I'm going to give you an example. You don't just have the most senior engineer on the team, the staff or the principal. There's one of them and everyone else is junior. And they speak up and say, I think we should do X. And all of the juniors are kind of just quiet and no one says anything. And it's like, okay, I guess we're doing X. And you just go do it. I think you want to create an environment. Again, engineering managers play a big responsibility here, but it's not limited to just them. Anyone through informal leadership can create a good environment for this. You want to encourage people to have healthy debates. You want to speak up. There's no stupid questions, right? If you have thoughts about something, you want to create that environment where people can speak up. And a lot of the time, from my experience, what I've noticed, especially if you say you have someone who's a little bit more vocal and they're more senior, and the rest of the team is more junior engineers that maybe are less vocal, they don't speak up as much. If you can get 1 or 2 of the more junior folks to find their voice in the room, you will very quickly find that a lot of the other more junior engineers share the same perspective. Not all the time, not on every topic, but I have seen many times before where someone is maybe steamrolling conversations because they're more senior. They don't mean to do it, but they're proposing things. No one's really disagreeing with them. And it's like, I guess we just do it. And the interesting thing is I've had many conversations with more junior folks, and they've told me in separate conversations, man, I wish we didn't do that. I wish we could do things differently. And I need to coach them in those conversations and say, hey, like, maybe you should, let's see if we can find a way for you to speak up about that. Or what makes you nervous to talk about that, right? Oh, I don't know, it's a dumb idea. Like the other person, I know they have a different perspective. And I need to find ways to encourage them. And if you're listening to this and you're a more senior engineer, like you should encourage other people if you're hearing this kind of thing. Encourage people to speak up. Because like I said, I've seen a couple people start to speak up, and then you get, if it's remote and people are on the call, you'll have people unmute to kind of chime in about it. Or you could look around the room and start to see more of the people nodding and going, yeah, like we do want to try that. So you want to create that safe place where people can bring things up. But debate is good. Debate is good. It's totally healthy. It's okay to have disagreements, but you need to be able to respect each other. And I think that's such a cool thing that can come out of conversations and retrospectives where people are debating things. You have a difference of opinions. You can talk about them. You can share your perspective, but you're all on the same team. You're all trying to drive towards a common goal. So when you are disagreeing, that's okay. Make the room to try and understand the other person's perspective, right? You might say, I don't agree with that, but we can go try the experiment for this time and measure it. If we get a good result coming out of it, like maybe my thought process wasn't the right one, or maybe we can try that and it works, and then we can layer on mine on top of that. We can try both out, right? There's so many opportunities, but I can remember being in retrospectives in like a small room, like maybe a little bit bigger than what I'm recording in right now. It's pretty small in here. And you'd be with the team and you'd leave the room and like the room was like hot, right? Because people were like really debating things. And it's like I said, it's uncomfortable, but I think you end up building a really strong trust relationship with your team and a lot of respect. Again, when you're making room for other people to talk and share their perspectives and you're genuinely listening, not just waiting for them to stop talking so you can be like, shut up, listen to me. You're truly trying to understand. I think that you can have such an awesome team dynamic, and you start to get into this groove where it feels like nothing can stop your team, right? Because you know that even when you're disagreeing together, you're all moving forward as a unit. So just wanted to say, healthy debate is good. I do encourage it, but you need to make room for people to share their perspectives. Okay. It's about 40 minutes so far on retros and the team side of things. I'm going to shift gears to talk about how you can leverage retrospectives for personal growth. But I want to make sure that there's an opportunity, again, if you have thoughts about how your team does this, you can jump in at any point and share that or ask questions. But I'm going to talk about the individual side, kind of going forward here. Speaking about hot rooms, this room is like 1,000,000 degrees right now. The AC should be on, but I feel like in our hallway where the thermostat is, it's probably a lot cooler. And then there's no thermostat in here. And it's all basically sealed off so I don't wake up my wife. And it's like a furnace. Okay, individual growth. This is going to be a lot of similar things. So when we talk about individual growth and how you can leverage a retrospective, the framing that I wrote about in my article was really about, the first thing is like set a time horizon to be able to do this. Now it's interesting for personal growth and not just like shipping software on some cadence, right? With personal growth, you might have goals that are on completely different timelines or time horizons. So I wrote down a couple of different things here just to give you some examples. I'll read them out, but like, some thoughts, graduating from boot camp or finishing a semester of college, or even, finishing college or university in its entirety. Like those could be things that are months or years long, right? So if you were to say like those are a goal and I'm only going to reflect on that when it's completely done, like maybe not a great opportunity, because you don't have a lot of time. Going back to what I said earlier, you don't have a lot of time to kind of make changes and adjustments, right? So you want to make a change based on your retrospective, but like you've already graduated. So you want to think about your time horizons. That's an example of something that's very long for a goal. I wrote down like build an application that does something, right? In some programming language. So this is one of those things where you're thinking about some early starter projects just for learning. So some application that does X in programming language Y. And I want to do that in 2 weeks. Cool. Okay, so you could maybe within a week you could do a retrospective on the first week and then at the end of the second week. Or maybe you want to do a retrospective at the end of that 2 week period when you're all done, because you're like, I'm going to do this again with another goal for an application in another programming language. So how did it go the first time? And for my next 2 weeks, when I go to build something, how did it look? I wrote complete a refactoring or a rewrite of a project by the end of the week. Right? So again, maybe it's not enough time for you midway to try experiments out and do a reflection on it. But at the end of that, odds are at some other point, you're going to have to refactor some code or rewrite some code. Maybe you want to do a retrospective on that 1 week of refactoring. What went well? You might say, oh, you know what I should have done? Like I should have had some more modular commits, because at the end of it, that 1 week, I had a big commit that I still couldn't land. So at the end of 1 week, I committed nothing. I shipped nothing. But instead, I'm just giving you an example. Instead, if after, every day I could just commit working code, even if it wasn't done, but it was working, I could have a snapshot. And now at the end of the week, I might have had 7 commits and it's still not done perfectly, but I've done 7 incremental changes that moved us in the right direction. So maybe that's a retrospection discussion you could have with yourself, and then you go take an action, which is more modular, granular commits for next time. I wrote, get through 3 hours of video tutorials this weekend, right? So this is less of a practical hands-on coding thing. And maybe you just want to watch some tutorials, but maybe you get through the end of that and you're like, I couldn't keep focused. Or you wanted to get through those tutorials and you wanted to be coding along the way and you didn't write any code, either because you were distracted or, maybe at the end of that, you're like, maybe watching video tutorials straight like that just isn't a good way for me to get hands-on practice. I didn't have a good opportunity to code. I was too busy just watching and it wasn't really sinking in. So you should have these conversations with yourself. Do a retrospective. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to go put sticky notes on a board. You can do whatever you want, but you want to do some critical reflection to see what's working, what's not. And the last example that I want to give you here, and there's, a million of these, right? I'm just giving you examples, but this one's probably relevant for a lot of people, especially going for interviews and stuff. But I wrote, because I had to do this for myself, right? So I wrote practice leak code interviews, practice leak code 4 interviews, 1 hour every weeknight over the next month as you're interviewing. So when I was applying for Microsoft, I did something like this. It was actually more, more time every day. Between lead code, behavioral interview questions, and system design questions. But you could do a retrospection, and I'm just going to give you a couple of different flavors of this. I wrote, you're doing this every weeknight over the next month. So maybe if you're assuming 4 weeks in the month, maybe every week you want to do a reflection on this. How many lead code problems did I get through? Am I being honest with myself? Was I just looking at the answers? Was I actually trying to do them? Is this working? What can I change? Right? So you might want to do that. Maybe if you're interviewing over a month and that first month maybe didn't go so well, right? That's okay. Right? It's not the end of the world. But if you were bombing, say you're getting interviews and you're not doing so well on the questions, what do you want to change about the questions that you're studying? Right? Are you maybe you're kind of like reading through them and kind of cheating because you're looking at the answer and then you write down the answer and you're going, hey, look, I got it. But you're not like challenging yourself enough and actually writing the code. Like you have to kind of do this honest conversation with yourself and try to change things over the next period. So some things to think through. But I wrote down that you want to set some clear goals and timelines. So hopefully when I was giving you those examples, you could see that I was giving you some things to think through, Not all of them did I list a clear goal, but if you were thinking through it, what is the goal after some period of time? And that way it really helps you think, if I want to go do some reflection on this, right? Maybe it's something that you're going to repeat overall multiple times and you can do a reflection at the end. Or maybe it's over a long enough period of time that you can do reflections in the middle and change up how you're approaching things. But you want to think about what your goals are and set a timeline. And then, like I said, for teams, the last thing I wrote here was experiment, right? You want to experiment with things to try differently. I don't remember the exact details of this because, unfortunately, it's been a long time. And every time I think through stuff from university, I realize I'm getting old. But I can remember, for myself, I don't like testing. I feel like testing is very unnatural. It's like a contrived situation where you're forced to just recall everything from memory and hope that you can go apply it. Just feels artificial, not real. It's my personal stance on it. It's also why when I give people interview questions, I try to make it as comfortable as possible with no tricks, because I just think it's unrealistic. So I remember in university, I had to teach myself how to study in a way that would be effective for me to go write exams. And without knowing it, like I wasn't totally familiar like with the idea of retrospectives back in university. Had a little bit of like I did, worked at places that used agile, but just wasn't really like clicking, I guess. So I kind of did like informal retrospectives with myself where again, I'd go to write an exam and I'm like, over an exam period, because we'd have like these weeks where they'd cram all of our engineering exams together. I'd be like, man, that sucked. Like, that sucked. I have to do something better for next time. I have to. And I would make these micro improvements. And by the end of studying in my 5th year of university, what I found was a strategy that worked really well for me. And if you consider this fact that I said that we had most of our exams put in 1 week, you might have something that spills, like 1 or 2 that would spill over into the next week, let's say. But I would say, look, okay, I have exam A, B, and C, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, right? Back to back. So what I would do is would study for the one on Monday. And I got to a point where I would take breaks. So I would study for like roughly like 30 to 40 minutes. And I'd take a break. And then I'd study for 30 to 40 minutes, take a break. And the breaks would be like 20 minutes long or something. Might go play a video game. Might just take a nap. Might go eat. But I found for myself that I needed to take breaks very regularly. I needed to. Because what I would do instead is if I tried to go for too long, it just wouldn't be effective. I would be at my computer finding anything else I could do. But my point here is that I kind of had to use this reflection process. Again, wasn't really formal for me, but I did these micro improvements where I could make changes and find a better way. So again, continuous improvement. This is just an example of how you can go accomplish that. So if that makes sense. The last part that I wrote in my newsletter was just about goals that I set myself for this year. These are kind of like vanity metrics. I'm just going to kind of say them quickly because it's kind of interesting. I had a bunch of stuff that a lot of this is for content creation because spoiler alert, that's what I'm doing right now is creating content. And I wrote like I wanted to reach 5,000 YouTube subscribers by everything was by the end of June. So I managed to achieve that and got a little bit ahead, which is great. Newsletter subscribers, I thought that I was doing some things. So again, running some experiments. A lot of this was just being a lot more open to collaboration. So I figured, obviously there's a lot of good things that come from collaborating, but I was like, hey, if I go collaborate, be more proactive about it. I wonder if that will help drive newsletter subscribers. And it might have, but certainly not in like a notable way for me. Now, does that mean I'm going to stop collaborating? Absolutely not, because I learned so many other valuable things from doing collaborations. It's just that it wasn't moving that particular metric. That's okay. I have to come up with a different strategy if I want to see that improve. But collaborations, have been amazing. I've been able to interview people on YouTube and stuff. Would not change that for anything. It's just that it didn't have a particular effect that I was thinking it might. LinkedIn, this is another thing. So you might be watching this on LinkedIn. I had a goal that I wanted to reach 15,000 LinkedIn followers. I got pretty close, fell short of that. That's okay. I think that a lot of stuff has changed on LinkedIn in terms of getting engagement. So I have just over 14,000 people that follow me on LinkedIn. Sometimes I make posts and the number of impressions is like 300 people, which kind of sucks because it's like the post never gets out to more than 300 people. So what am I to do with that? So I think a lot of that is just like, it's LinkedIn algorithm. I'm not saying like it's punishing me. It's always about your own content. So I need to change how I'm posting content in order to have more engagement. And you might say, well, that's a vanity metric. And I would say, sure. But if you take the stance that I'm trying to create educational content, if I'm creating educational content and there's 14,000 people that follow me and only 300 people, maybe not even my own followers, see that, like it's a very, very, very reduced audience. So it's very challenging for me to feel like this is being effective. So got to play around with that strategy. And then the last thing was that courses. So I set a goal for myself to deliver 2 more courses before the end of June. Managed to do that. And what's cool about that is that I'm doing my 4th Dome Train course right now currently. So I'm excited about that. That will be C# based. I have a follow-up course for immediately after that, and I am working on something new in terms of courses, so I'll be excited to share that with folks when that's ready. But those are some of my goals, and in my newsletter I wrote about like where maybe it didn't go right and some things I'm going to be changing to go forward, but I won't go into the details of that. Okay, so that's really it for retrospectives. I haven't seen any questions or anything come in on that, which is fine. As I continue on, because I'm going to shift gears a little bit here, I am going to go over to Reddit, and we're going to read some articles together, and I'm going to give you some commentary on them. I haven't done this before, but this was voted on LinkedIn. People were saying they wanted to see it, so I'm happy to do that. But again, if you're joining and you want to ask questions about retrospectives, or you've been watching and you're like, I'm just waiting for a time to ask, like, literally anytime you want, go ahead and type it in the chat. I'm watching. I think the chat is working on all platforms because I can see Instagram, I can see TikTok, I can see, I can see Twitter and YouTube have come in, and I am on the LinkedIn event, so I can see the comments if they come in as well. So, and I see on Instagram from DevCoder, I see thanks, right? So there's coming through. Oh, so here's a question. Is there any full stack job? I'm not currently offering any jobs, unfortunately. I've told anyone who asks me this, if you're interested in working at Microsoft, the best thing to do is check the careers page. Honestly, like I'm not currently hiring, and if you want to know who is, that is the spot to go. Even internal transfers go through the careers page. I transferred teams at the beginning of this year, and I still went through the careers page. There was a job posting internally. They interviewed, and I interviewed with the team. Like, you go through the careers page. So that was for a question on Instagram. Instagram chat doesn't come through on the common chat, by the way. And I also realized I'm not showing it. And that chat is out of date, I think. But anyway, so watching from, Rosa, good to see you. Watching from Instagram, good to hear you. Yeah, thanks, Rosa. I appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to switch gears then. If no one has questions about retrospectives, I'm going to jump over to Reddit, which is dangerous because Reddit is a scary place. But I'm not posting on Reddit right now. I'm going to be reading stuff from Reddit, so maybe not so scary. So Rosa and other folks on Instagram, I apologize because the format of my screen might not look good on Instagram. I'll try to see if I can get it to fit, but it might be kind of crappy. But I'm going to try. But I'm going to I'm going to summarize the post, and then I'll give my perspective on it. We have another question on Instagram. that says, will AI affect our job? I think the answer to that is absolutely AI will affect our jobs as software engineers, probably a lot of fields. But I don't think it will replace software engineers. I've talked about this before. My stance is that, and if I back up, I don't think this is specific to AI. I think when we have either technology changes or things that can potentially revolutionize how work is done, if you decide that seems scary, that seems like something I'm not interested, whatever it is, if you ignore it, I think that's basically kind of dangerous territory where you can expect that you'll become obsolete, but it has nothing to do with AI. AI is just one example of this type of thing where if you're like, hey, I don't care about it, oh, I don't want to pay attention to it, you can expect that probably other people are going to start leveraging it. They're going to use it as a tool that can get them ahead, and you'll probably be left in the dust. So I don't think it's unique to AI, but I think AI is one of these such tools that will help with that. So AI will affect our jobs. I don't think it will replace all of us. I think it will replace the people who don't want to get on board with leveraging more advanced tools. So that's my perspective on that. Okay, I'm going to get shifted over to Reddit. We are going to be looking at r/experienced devs, which is fun. I'm going to switch my screen over. It's going to drop me for just a moment, but I'm going to keep talking here. So hopefully you can see my screen, but I got to get my cam back up. There I am. Okay. I'm doing a check on Instagram. This looks absolutely awful. So I'm sorry, Instagram folks. It's pretty brutal. I wanted to... Oh man, this refreshed. I wanted to start with this one. Did a quick scan through this one. So again, sorry on Instagram because this is going to look pretty crappy, but I'll read it out pretty quickly. So this thread is called "Wearing Lots of Hats," and sorry, I gotta change something on TikTok here. So wearing lots of hats. I'm a team lead airdropped onto a team that was having lots of problems. I find myself spending time redesigning the data model, the architecture, the deploy system, basically everything, right? Release processes. The PM also leans on me to do the roadmap. That is a lot of things, right? A roadmap, you're doing a lot of architectural stuff. I also need to design components that can be used by other teams. So not just within the team, but other teams. So I need to know what the other teams are doing and where they are likely to be in a year. So it seems like, architectural roadmap, not only for the current team he's on that was having a lot of problems, but also supporting all these other teams. In addition to that, I'm mentoring the other engineers, trying to make sure their roles are aligned with what they want to be doing and doing tooling to work to clear the roadblocks, cross-team politics. Yep, that's a lot of stuff going on. Finally, I have my own coding task, so also has to go write code. Trying to make sure my queries hit indices and all that. Is this normal? I feel like I'm jumping between so many levels and not just code abstractions, but business levels too. I've never felt so tired of this. So I don't have context, right? I don't know if this person, I'm assuming they're working at a startup, a small company. This is what I would gather. I'm going to scan through the comments a little bit. Not normal if it's not sustainable. Maybe once you get the team stable. What does a team lead mean at the company you work for? Right, so this is interesting. Someone's basically trying to get them to think about level setting expectations. I think this is a critical one. Sounds like you take on the task on your shoulders. Should you be delegating, right? So I want you to think about this for a situation where maybe you are feeling overwhelmed. You're taking on a role and maybe you're not doing all these things. Maybe you're doing these things and more. But what I have highlighted on the screen right now, should you be delegating? And you can see this person said, I have no idea since I don't know what expectations are being placed on you. It comes back to expectations. As an engineering manager, this is something that I need to be very clear with people. And I would say if you were an individual contributor or even an engineering manager, any role, you want to make sure that you have level set expectations with your manager about what you should be doing. So this person's saying, should you be delegating? Right? this very well may be an expectation of this person, and maybe they're not leaning into it too heavily or as heavily as they should be. Because to be quite honest, it seems like they are doing a lot of stuff, and if they could manage to get all of those things done, that would be quite incredible. But I think the only way to make this more sustainable is that you cut some of those things out. So you put your hand up and say, hey, look, I can't do this. So whoever is expecting that of you, you say, hey, look, person X, I can't do this thing. You need to find someone else to do it. That could be you talking to your boss about it. That could be you telling another team that was expecting you to own, their components and stuff that you're creating. Hey, look, I cannot do this. Now, what I would recommend, and this depends on the team dynamics, is I would recommend having a conversation with your manager and saying, hey, look, I don't think I can balance all of these things. I need to start delegating it. And then try to get an understanding of where those boundaries are for you to be able to delegate stuff. This person says, sounds a bit like running a startup. That's kind of what I said. Full of C players, which is hard to say. I mean, based on what we're reading here, it does kind of sound like that. It almost sounds like no one else is doing anything. But we're only hearing one person's perspective, right? I like giving the benefit of the doubt. But truly, like, I would say, if we haven't heard from this person how much they've tried to delegate, they might not just be good at it. And that's okay. But I think they need to start with that. Is it possible for you to move some of the team members around? If at all possible, consider replacing C players with fresh talent. Yeah, so like this person is talking about a bit more of a restructuring. So this is a key point. I love this part right here. I'm going to highlight this. Again, sorry on Instagram it's not coming through, but this is not only is this not sustainable, but doing all of this yourself will reduce their ownership over architecture, components, and tooling. So this is a super awesome comment. I have to coach people on this kind of stuff. I've struggled with this myself earlier in my career. Because I worked at a startup before Microsoft, and for a long time I was putting on all of the hats and trying to do everything myself. And, when you go to help people, the common mistake when you're helping people is to give them the answers, right? I need help with this. No problem. Let me do it for you. Guess what happens? That person comes to you the next time they need help, and you get another person that does the same thing. The problem does not get reduced. You just create more work for yourself, because you are solving temporary problems and not solving the root of those problems, which is that people need to learn. So you need to teach them these things so that they can do it themselves. So this person is calling out something excellent here. If this one person tries to do all of these things, it's also perpetuating the problem. This is why I think delegating things is incredibly valuable. Right? This person can take some of their time back to focus on the critical things that they should be owning and delegating the rest. And it might not be obvious to them. And I'm not saying it should be or it is easily obvious. I think they need to be having conversations, but finding out what they can delegate. This person has an interesting point here. It sounds a bit like you're stopgapping lack of resources with your own effort, right? So kind of taking on too much. Oh, where did that go? Did that just disappear? Oh, weird. I didn't click that. I don't know how that happened. Sounds a bit like you're stopgapping lack of resources. How is your managing up? Right? Sounds like it's time to figure out which outcomes need to be properly resourced versus which efforts need to be dropped. So this is another strategy, right? So delegation's one part, but it's pretty it sounds like a startup problem, right? A lot of the time at startups, everything is a priority. I mean, we see this at a lot of companies, not just startups, but if everything's a priority, how do you pick the priority thing, right? Everything can't be the same priority. It's impossible. There are things that take higher priority. So if you only have so many resources, you need to start having conversations with people that are more in charge and saying, look, these things cannot get done. There is no physical way for them to get done. Even if you're delegating, you might say, we've delegated everything we can. These things cannot get done. Or they will get done, but they're going to, it's 6 months, it's a year out. They'll get done, but that's when they're going to happen. You need to be ready to have those conversations. And they're hard conversations. I'm not saying this like it's a trivial thing, but these are conversations that need to happen. Because if not, and someone has the expectation that stuff's going to get done, right? How is your managing up? You need to be having conversation with your manager, leadership, and being transparent about this stuff. It's a very challenging spot to be in. I have lived this kind of thing before, not necessarily I'll back up. I've airdropped myself into teams that were having lots of problems. And I've done that because I thought that it was critical for the business. And I have airdropped myself into teams that were having problems to try and rectify them. Because if not, I strongly felt like the business would not succeed. And when I say not succeed, that might be too harsh. I don't want to say like it would have crumbled and failed, but I feel like it would have been very hindered. So I have airdropped myself into teams like that. And that did mean taking on a little bit too much, but ultimately try to tackle it from different angles, right? What could I delegate? What could I help clarify? And then managing up to try and have conversations about how to do things differently. Ultimately, in this one particular case, and I'm going to talk about this, and I don't want someone to hear what I'm saying if you worked with me before. I don't want you to hear this like you were the problem on the team, because it was not a person problem, just for the record. I want to be transparent about that. So fundamentally like an organizational thing with a lot of baggage and history attached to it. No single person's fault. One of the outcomes is that I wanted to show that the process and the structure of the team was ineffective. And I was able to manage up, get resources to spin up another team to show how the work could be done in a different way. And we literally carved out a big chunk of work that one of the teams was responsible for. And we said, if you just do it a different way, and we demonstrated it, it can be dramatically faster without losing the quality. So I had to manage up in that situation and show a different way for things to get done. But this is a hard thing. I think delegation, incredibly important. Get your expectations aligned with your manager, incredibly important. And then manage up. Talk about what things are going to have to drop and get people to make difficult decisions. You can't do everything. And basically, the outcome of that is that work is going to fall off. Make sure if people are like, it all has to get done, it's not going to happen, right? If truly it can't all fit, make sure that you understand the priority and you're constantly communicating. This is how it's going to work. Well, that's a tricky one. It's not uncommon, though, especially in startups. Cool. I'm going to keep going through a couple of these. I plan on going for another 50 minutes on this stream. So by all means, if you have questions, you want to see other articles and stuff, let me know. I got to keep sipping this water. I'm going to go to work tomorrow and not have any voice. Pixel pushing causing burnout. Am I the a-hole? Let's see. Okay. Kind of want to know if I'm the a-hole here. I've been writing software for over 15 years now, with much of that in web applications. I have a product owner that is huge on pixel pushing. And they explain what it is. I was going to elaborate for folks that don't know. Literally writing bugs over 1 pixel here, 3 pixels there to move around UI elements, or something like a debounce of 500 milliseconds is too slow. So when they talk about pixel pushing, it's kind of like, and this is going to change depending on people's perspectives, but the perspective that this person has is that this work is extremely nitpicky and is not offering value for how much effort goes into it. And even if it's to move something 1 pixel, it's not a lot of effort, right? But it's a context switch, it's a code commit might be a review, it might be it might be a build. The overhead that goes into it to move something a pixel, they're like, it's just not worth it. It's just not. And this person keeps doing it. So that's kind of what they're getting at here. They keep talking about it a little bit more. We have a designer throwing together Figma pages. And what we write the first time I was always really close to it. I end up having to put the Figma image on the web page and spend an hour or so, something like a data grid, because every pixel on every column has to be 100% exact. This is even worse. This is an internal web app. Internal. No external. Oh my goodness. No external customers see this. You can tell I'm getting heated about this. The product owner is way more concerned with how it looks in ways that a normal person would not even perceive than the actual functionality under the hood, which is shown in the absolute slowness. She's writing these requirements. Okay. Never experienced such tight control. I don't. Oh, wow. These are really strong words, right? So let's kind of read through these. I feel suffocated and I'm now burnt out. I don't ever want to be an IC again. I'm looking for management positions that I can hopefully hold on for 5 to 10 more years when I decide to retire completely. If it wasn't for that, I don't know if I can get the same pay and benefits quickly. I would quit right now. Wow. That's pretty strong words, right? Yeah, that's a hard one. So I'm gonna give you an experience that I had working with a UX designer. This is a good story, by the way, as in like positive outcome. And so nothing I'm about to say is hopefully does not come across like I'm painting this person in a bad light, because I absolutely love working with her and my team did as well. But I want to paint a bit of a picture here. So I worked on it started off as a prototype, and we said, holy crap, we got something here. And we sat and I don't know if people know this terminology, but like we basically made a war room. We locked ourselves in a room, a couple of us, to go work on this prototype and start transforming it into a product. Because we said, like I said, holy crap, we have something here. We need to go move as fast as we possibly can to get this going. So not a typical situation. It's not always how I'd recommend doing stuff. It worked really well in this case. What it meant, though, is that as the prototype we were building was rapidly becoming more mature, because we're going to get to a point where we have to ship it, it meant that we have to start doing stuff that wasn't just code it as fast as you can and, review it yourself, push it up and break the build 100 times. Like, yeah, kind of have to start maturing if it's going to go out the door. So we need it because we had other products. We needed to make sure that it was branded properly and, could go into customers' hands. We were proving very quickly the functionality was there, but it's not something that we could put into users' hands and have a company be like, we made this. If you were just a solo dev being like, hey, look, I built something cool, sure, who cares? But it was really difficult to look at what we built and say, yeah, like, our company is proud of how this looks, right? Or it's following our branding. It's following other things we do, because it didn't. And I remember we had the UX, and I can't remember exactly how it was, but the UX designer came on board, kind of did a bit of a conversation about like what the product does and stuff. And I remember getting the first set of UI requirements, and we were just like absolutely not. Like, just nope. And it wasn't like, we don't like you. In the beginning, it was very much like, what you're asking for, like, functionally won't work. Like, we were seeing things that was like, functionally, it just doesn't work this way. And that led to a very interesting conversation, because, and she's so good at her job, because she would do like, not just like a great eye for user experience, but she was a good user proxy too. So she would say, well, why not? Right? Like, why doesn't it work that way? And it challenged us because we would say, well, we built it this other way. What do you mean? Why does it work this way? Because it works this other way. That's how we built it, right? So part of it was like, it could have, like in some cases, it could have worked the way that she said. It could have. But it didn't at that point in time. And that was an interesting crossroads to have at the beginning of our working relationship with her on this product, because I think it set the stage very well. Because we were able to say to her, look, it doesn't work that way right now. And we can take some of the pieces that you're talking about and we can start moving in that direction. So let's do that, right? And what we would do with her is start using her UI designs as sort of like a North Star that we wanted to work towards. And it was awesome because the conversations we had with her were like, look, here's what we got right now. Here's the direction we plan to head in as we're building these features out. Like, this would be a good opportunity for us to maybe take advantage of shifting this over. And it worked so well. It worked so well because, well, if we go back to just like being agile and continuous improvement, we were shipping stuff and then customers would try it. And there were things literally from the first set of designs that she carried through the entire time, and we never did them. And it's not like we were saying, haha, screw you, look, we're not listening to you. We never did them because they truly never became the top of the priority list, ever. Ever. And that was okay. Right? So in this situation, it's challenging because this individual is not working with the UX designer, and they're talking about a PM in this case, right? Different roles, kind of talking about a similar situation. Call them like a product owner in this case, because in the end, this person's signing off on the requirements. We were very fortunate because we communicated with them and they understood this software has got to get out the door. That's it. It needs to go out. And truly, they understood the value. We need to ship the value to the customers. They understood that. And then we were able to get them as close as we could with their, like, to their designs with our own user interface. And they were like, great, that's fine. So to me, how I would approach this conversation is like, it sounds like, and a lot of times when I see something like this conversation that we see with this pixel pushing, going back to the Reddit article, the Reddit post, sorry, is there is a misunderstanding of what's valuable here. And it doesn't mean that the UX designer, or they're calling them a PM in this case, it doesn't mean that their opinions are invalid, right? If it needs to be over a pixel or 3 pixels or whatever, like, that might be totally right? Might be. I don't know. Or maybe they have they're talking about debouncing as well, being too slow or whatever. That might be accurate from a UX perspective. It might be accurate. I have no idea. But let's assume, best intentions, this person knows what they're talking about and what they're saying is right. It's not a matter of it being right or wrong, though, because it's a matter of what's a priority. So in this particular case, it sounds pretty sketchy because it sounds like the situation I had was we had a UX designer. She is not prioritizing our backlog. We are also working with a PM who is a product owner, and the UX designer had input into this. And we basically, had conversations with her, had her blessing to say, like, it's good enough, keep going. Right? She would sign off as a stakeholder saying, I understand where it's at, let's move forward. It sounds like in this case, this is their PM that they're talking about is their product owner, and they need to be able to convince them of the value for the customer. So this is an example where I would say, I don't think that this product owner is prioritizing the right things. Now, how to go approach this is challenging because I don't know the structure of the team in this case, so it makes it really difficult to say what's right or wrong. or even what steps you take. Maybe we should scroll through. I want to give you a little bit of my opinion before I scroll too far, but some things I'm thinking about are one, within a team, it sounds like there is not alignment about what is valued, right? And I think driving towards alignment in value is important. So shipping value to customers is really at the center of it. And is the value in the pixel accuracy? Like, no. So I'm very much in agreement with what this individual's saying and why they're frustrated. Like, I get it. So I would want to try and find ways to explain to this product manager about the value that's being shipped. Maybe you could do it in a data-driven way. And again, I don't know. I'm going to scroll through and see if they comment and we get some more insights here. But something that could be interesting is like, if you can't convince them that, you know, being pixel perfect is of the highest value, could you use data to prove what is higher value? Could you do surveys? Could you do customer satisfaction type of things? Right? Could you run experiments where you're spending time, you know, you're saying, okay, we can't get these features done, right? We're spending the time doing what you said. We're moving things, getting these pixels more accurate. Is the customer satisfaction dropping because we're not shipping value, like fixing bugs, adding features? Could you do it the opposite way? So that's one thing, is can we get more data driven? Another thing that I'm interested in here is like, I don't like this necessarily because I think it's focusing on the wrong thing, but like, are there ways to improve the process where like you aren't off by a couple pixels here and there? Or if it's debalancing stuff, like, can you get those requirements more up front? I don't know. Or could you have a bit of a contract where it's like, maybe on the pixel thing, maybe they're not willing to budge, but for the debalancing, like maybe can they provide you that information up front? And if they change their mind later, like you can come up with an agreement, like we have to go postpone updating that because, you know, it's a lower priority thing. We did what you said. Your update to its lower priority, it's a change of scope. You know, put it on the backlog, see what happens. So I think there's a couple things we could do here, but one of the other directions that I'd like to go is like, if this conversation's not working well because this individual, the product owner or the PM here, is not really getting on the same page. Again, so many assumptions are being made here, but if you're having difficulty communicating and trying to get on the same page and saying like, how do we get the value delivered? I would be curious what their reporting structure looks like, because it might be something you need to escalate. It might be something. So in Microsoft, we have engineering org structure and a PM org structure. It might be something where a more parent PM, so that PM's manager or something, you might be able to escalate it and say, look, we've had some conversations about this. I still don't feel comfortable. Could we talk about this more? I don't like that a ton because it feels like you're circumventing. But if you've already had conversations and people aren't aligning, sometimes escalation is necessary. So here's a bunch of ideas. Let's go scroll through and see if they give any more context. Maybe I can come up with some better answers. So this user is Bobby Jew Gaming. So this is not normal in any way. Yeah, agreed. The PO is wasting money and time for irrelevant minutia, and nobody is benefiting from it. Right? So that's why I said that the value is not really understood by this person, I think. There are definitely some UI purely cosmetic, sometimes even alignment only issues. This person says it's not a bad thing for this design product person to be so detailed and having such high expectations. It's what I said earlier when I said it's not wrong, right? They might be absolutely correct in saying it needs to be over X pixels or debalance, change, whatever. They might be correct in those statements. I have no idea. However, all involved must understand that such standards can only be sustained at a reasonable cost, right? There's trade-offs. That way you can do some define once, apply everywhere, feel more at ease. Style guides, right? Oh man. Oh, I realize if I'm clicking, you probably can't see my cursor when I'm doing this. Maybe you can. Apparently, before I clicked on the background and it collapsed on the Reddit page, so wasn't expecting that. What's going on for this one? So this says, this is definitely normal for organizations that value their UI UX. However, for internal apps, there's a lot of latitude. Yeah. I don't know. I think that we really valued our UI and UX where I worked before, but I think like clearly we didn't value it paramount to everything else. We valued shipping value. Right? Like, so our audience, and this is an important thing to understand too, our audience was, this is for digital forensics. So forensic investigators, forensic examiners, they don't care how pretty something is at the end of the day. It's just, it's a misalignment in value. I don't know enough about where this person's working. Truly, it would be hard for me to believe that they would value 1 pixel off kind of thing over bug fixes, other things. It'd be hard for me to believe that, but it's possible. If it's slowing everything else, you need to report to your manager. This is what I was talking about with the escalation thing. But I think before this statement, this is where I would, and I encourage other people to do this, because I don't know, maybe this person has that wrote this, but I encourage people to try working with the person that they have problems with. And it seems counterintuitive because a lot of the time you're like, why do I want to go spend time talking with so-and-so? Like, usually by this point, you're so frustrated with this person that like the thought of engaging with them, you're like, no, I don't want to do this. Right? Like you'd rather just like not go into work than have to talk to this person. But that's because this has gone on for so long. And I do highly recommend people start to, before you get so far along where you're resenting everything this person does, you try to have the difficult conversations early. So I would highly recommend, even for this person, like I have highlighted here, if it's slowing everything else, you need to report to your manager. Like before that, please try and take the time to have an honest conversation with this person. Explain what's going on, why it's impacting, try to get a value alignment. And if nothing's changing and you've made an attempt to do that, I think escalating is totally fine. Right? There's situations where I've had people on my team come to me and they haven't done what I just recommended first. And I don't hold that against them, but I always try to give them that opportunity. If they're like, hey, like maybe they don't say it directly, but they're kind of escalating something. I like to ask, hey, have you tried talking with that person? Have you tried, sorting this out? Most of the time, the answer is no. And then I like to give them the chance to say, hey, look, here's why this could be a really good opportunity. I think you should try. But if you're feeling uncomfortable about it, or this isn't a good time for it, or, whatever the reason, I can go approach this. And most of the time, I've actually had people go and have these difficult conversations on their own. And I would say, and I don't have stats on this, I don't keep like a little logbook and record it. So it's all anecdotal, so I could be making up all my numbers, but I would say of the people, which is over 50%, I would say, that go try this on their own, right? So over 50% of the people I have this conversation with do have the conversation on their own. And I would say most, so again, over 50% of those people, probably closer to like 75 to like 80% range, they have a very good outcome. Very good. They just take the time to get on the same page as the other person. That doesn't mean that it's going to resolve everything, but it has been quite fascinating to see that people end up resolving problems and they end up having a better working relationship with the person they had a conversation with. So I do recommend that as a first step. Escalate if you need to. Let's see if there's anything else in here that's interesting. So, okay, maybe this is the last one we'll kind of touch on here. This is specific to this situation, but kind of what I was talking about. Like, are there ways to make this process better? Can you avoid these challenges. And this one says, working with difficult product people definitely sucks, but Figma does display the CSS used to style a page, so you don't have to eyeball things. And another person responded, this was my thought. This coworker sounds insane, but Figma is really easy to use and will even spit out the values so you can copy paste or easily check values in dev mode. It sounds like maybe the gap is in designer somehow using Figma incorrectly or something, because you don't need to get out of magnifying glass to compare things. So again, we picked a couple of comments, and this kind of seems to cover a lot of what I was saying, but this one is an example of maybe we can go back to the process that's being followed. Can we maybe look at that a little bit and see if we can tune it? Because maybe there's a better way to avoid a lot of these things in the first place, right? You can save some time. You can do things the way the designer wants. Everyone wins, right? Maybe. So that's an option. Time check, another 30 minutes or so. Thanks for folks for joining on the stream. If you joined late, I was talking a little bit earlier about retrospectives, retrospection. If you are interested in that topic and you joined late and you have questions on how your team's doing retrospectives or why you might want to consider doing them, anything related to that topic, just add it in the chat. Happy to pause going through Reddit articles and chat about that. I'm just trying to look for some interesting articles. Oh, have you worked before without stories board to track progress? Yes, I have. And I've done it the other way too. Okay, let's see. Just joined a company and their workflow is quite unusual. We have hour-long daily meetings. Ooh, yikes. Okay. Our manager prefers to set priorities during these dailies, and every day we need to demo what we accomplished the previous day based on his requests. This approach leads to a lot of context switching, and PRs are starting to pile up. You can imagine. Despite this, he keeps assigning more tasks on different PRs. Okay. What bothers me the most is a lack of clear requirements, which is interesting based on what we're reading here so far, right? Hour-long daily meetings, priorities are set, but there's a lack of clear requirements. So you have clear priorities with no clear requirements, okay? If I accidentally miss asking for a specific requirement, he complains the next day, even though he didn't specify it. This was particularly frustrating, especially since I've only been here for 2 weeks. Okay, so I'm going to pause on this one and talk about this briefly. If I accidentally miss asking for a specific requirement, he complains the next day. So, I mean, personal opinion, I don't think you should go complaining about this kind of stuff. So from this author's perspective, sure, I don't think that that's a great experience where your manager's just like complaining about that kind of thing. Because what I was even talking about earlier, not for this this post, it's like level setting expectations, right? You need to clarify with people, especially new people, these are the expectations. I expect, just to give you an example, I expect that you are going to be trying to ask about requirements. And, you know, if we leave this this stand-up meeting and you think of more requirements that you need clarification on, that you're messaging me, you're asking me, we get them clarified, because I don't want to have unexpected requirements or gaps the next day, right? We want to minimize that. It should be a very rare occurrence. But you set that expectation. Do I think that's great? Like, not really. I'm just giving you an example for this context, right? That might be a way that they could go approach this. So it's frustrating for this person because that expectation was not clear. Now, to be fair, even if that expectation was clear, it probably sucks a little bit, but another reason for frustration. But I think the level setting of expectations is the gap here, and the biggest gap on what I have highlighted. So now they go on to say, I suggested using a board to track stories and progress, but I was told this is just how they work and not everyone fits in. Hello, Satya, from Germany. I believe that's the Deutschland. I believe that translates directly to hello from Germany. I think. Cool. So they're suggesting using a board which is, I think, an interesting tool for the situation they're in. But I was told this is just how they work and not everyone fits in. Don't like that. Just how they work and not everyone fits in. I'm considering resigning and looking for a new job, but I wanted to get some opinions here. Am I being too lazy, or is this kind of workflow common for some folks? Okay, I think a couple things to consider. I don't know. Awesome. I don't know this person's situation. I don't know enough about the company. You know, we're seeing one person's perspective. Kind of have to look at it through this lens. There's a lot I don't like in this situation, right? The first part was we were getting this. Sounds like there's not clear expectations. It's not a good spot to be in, and that can be frustrating for a lot of people, right? So fair. I don't like this. So someone's coming up with a proposal. Doesn't mean you have to take the proposal, right? That's not the bad part. I've had to tell many people, and I have made proposals where it was the answer is no to that for now. That's okay, right? But it's the response. This is just how they work, and not everyone fits in. Like, that's the part I don't like. It might be true that not everyone fits in. Like, clearly, right? This person is very much challenged by this way of working, so they don't fit into this. So I don't like it because it sounds very rigid and not welcoming. Okay, so a couple things. I don't know if this manager is, it kind of sounds like they're micromanaging a little bit. Again, I don't know what's happening in the rest of the day, but running an hour-long meeting, setting priorities every day and having people demo, like parts of this I understand because there are pieces of this. This really ties back into what we were talking about at the beginning, the very beginning of this stream for like a process heavy, air quotes, agile thing, right? This seems like someone's taking some agile concepts. You have stand-ups, you have demos, you get this feedback loop, right? Sounds like these are some agile things that someone just said, here's the process, now it's agile. This is the side effect. This is why people say they hate agile. This is it, right? This is literally it. So I'm trying to think of what I would advise this person to do, and it's hard because I don't know the manager and a lot of the other team dynamics. Something that I would recommend at least exploring, feeling out, is you can get, if you get other people to buy in to some of your ideas, or you can at least survey and see if other people feel this way, this could be an interesting start. So it sounds like it's not going so well with the interactions with the manager to start with. Okay, so we can come back and explore that later. It might be interesting to check with some of the other teammates, right? And instead of going, hey, don't you think this sucks? Should we change it? Like, instead of approaching it that way, you might be able to reach out to someone and say, hey, I'm having some difficulties, doing this effectively. Could you give me some advice? Right? Like, I'd like to learn from you. Like I'm new here. I want to learn how to do this effectively. Could you give me some advice? And approach a few people in the team and see what their perspectives are. Because while even as I read this, I'm like, I don't like a lot of what's going on here. Maybe it literally does work benefit of the doubt. Maybe it works super effectively for their team. Right? Maybe. I have no idea. Let's pretend it does, okay? Let's pretend they were an extremely effective team. This person's joined, and it literally just does not work well for them, but it works well for the team. Maybe there's an opportunity where this individual could learn from the other team members about how to do this type of work effectively, and they could try some things out and kind of find their groove working in this way. Maybe. But I think what's more likely, this is, Satya kind of said it on the YouTube chat, right? This is what I wanted to say is it's probably more likely, this other thing, that you're going to see the other team members highlighting a bunch of stuff that they're not totally content with, right? So Satya here is saying, feels like the manager came up with how it's implemented and he can't cope with the criticism. Yeah, so how much of that is like purely on the manager or not sure. But I think what's going on here is that there was a process put in place. Maybe it was formed over time, whatever, for all the right intentions. I like to assume best intentions in this kind of stuff. And what's happening is that there is no good feedback loop for how these things are operating. And I would imagine other people on the team are probably feeling some challenges with this. So I do think that, reaching out, kind of learning from the other teammates, call it that, right? We're trying to learn from them. You'll probably uncover that there's some challenges. Now, instead of you going back to your manager and saying, I want to go change this, we should go do this, you might be able to get the team to kind of rally behind something. You might be able to leverage some more senior people on the team to speak up. And again, I think that, teams I manage, I like new people being able to speak up and share things. But I am not the manager of this team, and I want to be careful about the advice I'm giving here. So I want to make a safe place in general for everyone on the team. And if this manager is not really doing that, you might be able to lean on some of the more senior people and kind of seed the idea with them, and they might be able to bring it up. And that way, maybe the manager is like, oh, even the senior people are kind of saying this. Maybe we should look into this. Again, not a huge fan of that, but in this circumstance, it might work. I'm going to scroll a little bit lower and see if anything else was added. Daily demos. Yeah, no thanks. This sounds like the least productive method possible. And it's got 40 upvotes. Like, yeah, I agree. This is why I said it sounds like someone tried to pick, let's do agile, and they just made a process that sounds like they picked agile things. Yeah. Other people are saying might be time for a new job. So this person was saying, okay, someone was like, maybe when you go interview next time, like you should do a better job asking. This is what I don't like about Reddit. I think it's like good advice, but I'm going to read this out because this is exactly why I don't like Reddit, because people are pretty crappy on here. This person responded and said, in a quote, I am in literal hell and everything is on fire. The devil is poking me in the butt daily. Is this reasonable for a holiday resort? And they say, this is what you sound like. Like, I don't know. I just like, you didn't have to say that. Like, why are you being a butt? You don't have to do that. Seems like a crappy way to deliver a point. Then they go on to say, find a new job and figure out how or what questions to ask for your next round of interviews. They're basically saying, like, it's your fault you ended up here. And like, maybe, but like, do you really have, like, I don't know. I don't like being talked to like that. I wouldn't do that to someone else. I don't know why people are like that on the internet. I don't know if I'll ever know, but here we are. And then the OP goes, I did ask the correct questions. My specific question was, how is a day as a developer? What methodologies do you use? Do you have a lot of meetings? And the answer was simple, saying that it depends on the project I will be allocated, but most teams use the casual Scrum Kanban. I guess I just got unlucky. I literally bet you that they think they are doing Scrum and or Kanban by doing this. Somehow without a board, somehow by not actually being agile, but I bet you that's what they're thinking. And then this person says, big tech boss says to do this, but isn't on sprint board. Boss says okay and adds it. That's not safe for work. I'm not going to read that out loud. That doesn't sound like big tech to me, at least where I work. I don't know. I'm pretty flexible on stuff. The feature crew. So I have feature crews, which are like teams within teams. And we will, like, I don't impose anything. And I've actually had people, literally when I joined this team, they said, we would like to use a sprint board. I said, great, let's go do that. Like, I'm happy to do that. And I've worked, on other teams where it's like they just don't need it. And it's because of how we're working. Like, the situations are different. I don't come in and impose anything. The thing that I try to impose is that people make sure that their voice can be heard and that we can make things better, but they got to speak up about what they want to change. Um, let's see, anything else that's interesting here? Yeah. If someone asked me to do this, I'd laugh. The fact that this manager even convinced a team of people to do it is actually somewhat impressive. Daily demos off of verbal instructions. This guy invented a new form of torture. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. And this last one before I go to another topic here. Any environment where you have to do daily demos is maximally toxic. Sometimes you'll have to spend an entire day reading documentation. You have nothing new to demo. Yeah. Yeah, it's like I can get behind the ideas of demoing, right? But you need to, I think there's a lot more context that has to be provided to an engineering team to be able to do that effectively. And I can see it being a big time sink. Um, like, I think an important thing to identify is like, what is the goal of demoing? Because if the goal of demoing is to have everyone learn from it, like, maybe that's overkill to do that every day. If the goal of demoing is to make sure that people are staying on track with the product owner and expectations, okay, like, that might be encouraging you to try and get smaller incremental commits, right? You are not doing huge long-lived features where, after 3 weeks you go land something and the product owner's like, what the heck is this? This isn't what we talked about. It might be trying to encourage some of that, but you don't need a whole team together to do that. That should be a conversation between the developers working on the feature and the product owner. And yeah, like, I think personally, daily interactions like that might be overkill. Although I've worked on really small teams that I've managed, and context here is like, I spent a big chunk of my career managing teams and being the engineer on the team as well. So I had direct reports, but I was also coding. And there were times where we would almost daily have demos, but it was like, it came up naturally. Like, we were excited to show off what we were working on, and our product owner was excited to see. So, like, that was just a normal, natural thing, not like okay, it's whatever o'clock, you better show me or else. Like, so a lot of stuff on here, not so great. But yeah, I kind of offered some of my thoughts a little bit earlier. That's how I'd look at that. How do I create transparency with regard to missing work performance of colleagues? This one could be interesting. Let's see. Apparently not. Okay. Just completely gone. Maybe this person got totally flamed on Reddit. Okay, can we just read this part and infer the rest? I don't know if there's enough context here. Maybe not. Okay, let's keep going on. I don't want to talk about contracts. No. This one can be interesting. How to deal with lack of process causing bugs on large production platform. I work on large production platforms. Let's see. I work for a big company, and until recently, I used to work and pretty much manage our internal tool. Okay. Life has been quite easy for me, so we're never too concerned about bugs or general performance. Company didn't want to invest extra resources. Okay. Kind of like, okay, you don't got a lot of resources, you're not going to spend time on that stuff, is what it sounds like. So their team, front end and back end, always lacked a clear process and usually preferred, let's do this for now, and if it breaks, we'll fix it later. Favoring faster delivery over quality. Okay, I could, no one set the precedent. Sure, like, nothing wrong with that if that's what the team values, right? it's only wrong if people have different expectations of that. So we don't really follow agile development. It's more of a constant stream of tickets, and we just try to deliver them fast. I mean, this sounds agile to me. We just try to deliver them fast. We barely do any refinement of the tasks, and most of them have little, like, add this feature to this page, and the body of the ticket is empty. Yeah, I mean, this is This is as agile as it gets. Now I've been assigned to work on another team's product, the main customer facing app. It's a very solid project and I enjoy both their code and their process. However, in the past month, I had a couple of occasions where I deployed breaking changes, which resulted in small and fixable issues with some functionalities on the production platform. Here's a strong word. I blame this on my team's process, where, for example, asking a PM to review the changes means I'm spending 5 minutes doing quick tests, approving, they don't have QA, and the same can be said about most people on our team, forcing me to put extra effort on figuring out all possible scenarios and testing my own code deeply. Okay. Question, am I expecting too much from my team and instead I should spend more time understanding all possible use cases scenarios? I mean, this is a bit of an exaggeration, and it's hard to, I don't know what the right way to say this is, but it's hard to say yes to this because I want to say, yes, you should spend more time understanding more use cases and scenarios, but there's no one that understands all possible use cases and scenarios. It's just like, it's not an achievable thing. It just isn't. Because even if you had your whole team go look through it and you release it, I can guarantee you a customer is going to find a different use case and scenario that you guys never thought of. So I don't think it's fair to ask this question because no, you're not going to find all possible use cases and scenarios, but should you spend more time? Yeah. And that's going to take time and domain experience for sure. So I think you should. Am I at fault for missing certain use cases and breaking existing functionalities because of that? Like yes and no. Like, should you feel bad about it? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You shouldn't feel bad about it. Are you air quotes at fault? Like a little bit, but not on your own. Right? Like, this is the thing. Your whole team is equally at fault. And maybe not the way your team is set up, which makes this hard to answer, but I want to talk through this. Like if this were a team that I managed, right? Like I would encourage people to be thinking more about use cases and scenarios for sure. If you miss them, that's okay. It's not just your fault. It would be also my fault too, right? As the manager of the team, everyone has a bit of a role here when we have gaps or we have regressions. And this is the thing, like I'm saying everyone has a responsibility, so everyone has a little bit of blame, but it's also what makes it blameless, right? You would have a reflection on this type of thing, and instead of going, what's this poster's name? Sorte the dog. So instead of saying, hey, Sorte, you did bad, you should feel bad, we're going to punish you, we would just try to close the gaps. So why did we miss that scenario? How could we do a better job next time? And what experiment are we going to try to make that better? What are like the, repair items? What comes out of this that we're going to learn to do better next time? If that means, like, for you have a little bit more responsibility to spend some more time on stuff, great, okay. Are there coded tests that we could be writing on this type of stuff? Could we have earlier feedback? Could we have more specialized feedback? Right? There's so many different things you could start to explore here. So my response to this person is not, are you solely at fault and you should feel bad for this? Like, absolutely not. Right? We have thousands of clients and often some of them require different implementations. Okay. So I like to avoid these situations where I feel like I messed up, not because of code quality, but more due to lack of testing communications and over relying on other people such as my PM. TLDR, my team doesn't really follow a proper process. How can I enforce a better process to prevent the release? Okay, so this part here and the last part, how can I push them to use agile practices properly? This is probably a good one to end this stream on because this is not planned and it's actually bringing stuff back full circle. We love when that happens. So how can I push them to use agile practices properly? And I wouldn't. Personally, I wouldn't. And the reason I wouldn't is because I would say, how do we get the team to continuously improve? See what I did there? It's not going to force agile. We're not forcing anything. We're not pushing anyone any direction except how do we get better? And to me, that lowers the barrier dramatically, right? You are a team. You all want to do better. You are experiencing some friction. Other people are probably experiencing similar friction. Cool. How do we do this better? What can we try? And this is where I would say, I don't know what other processes you have. If you don't have a retrospective, or in this case, we're talking about some incidents from things breaking, something similar to a retrospective in general for your processes that are in place, or a post-incident review, post-mortem in some cases, it'll go by that name. You have a review process to talk about things that you may want to change. Start with that. Do it informally. Do something, right? Start making a habit of introducing this thing where you can reflect and start incrementally driving little experiments. Hey, we didn't like how that went. What can we try doing next time? What's a little thing that we could try adjusting? And you build momentum this way. So I would try to rally behind that, try to get some buy-in from other team members. So again, circulating, kind of asking like if other people, learn from them. How are you getting through this? How are you avoiding some of these things? Seek to understand, because you will learn a lot of stuff from other people on the team, and you might learn where their challenges are too. And then you can start to say, hey, on this thing that we did, it seemed like this was a common challenge. Do you think we could try things this way? Right? And you start to just introduce little experiments. If you can get your whole team bought into doing something that is focused on continuous improvement, so you leverage a retrospection, post-incident reviews, you get in the habit of identifying things that you want to try to make things better, try them out, and then you reflect again and say if it was better or not. That's what I would recommend here, not pushing a team to go use, agile practices. I don't know, maybe agile's not even a good fit for this team. I just don't know. It's not for me to say. I think probably it could work well without knowing much about it. I think in a lot of situations, agile can work very well. But I think the big thing here is that there isn't no one is working together on refining this process. So do we blame it on the team's process? I don't blame it on the team. So I'm going to highlight this. Sorry, again, Instagram folks, you can't see what I'm highlighting because it's a little bit off the screen, I think. But I don't blame it on the team's process directly. I blame it on the team not improving their process and refining it, is how I would look at that. So I have been in situations where, so they're saying they don't have QA. I've been in situations where, and I'm going to walk you through this briefly and kind of wrap up this stream, but going back to even the prototype product I was talking about earlier, when that started to become more real, one of my very good friends, and so former colleague from this team, he was a test strategist that we had hired on. Hello, Andreas from Greece. Thank you. I am wrapping up soon, though, so I apologize. I should mention before I finish my thought on this, I am going to try to stream in the morning. And last time I said this, I slept in because I couldn't do it, and I streamed at night. I'm going to try to stream at 7 a.m. PST. I'm going to try to. It's going to be in the morning tomorrow. Hopefully 7 a.m. PST. And I'm going to be going through code tomorrow, so that'll be different. Okay, but to wrap this one up, on that prototype product that was becoming more real, we had a test strategist that was on our team, and one of the common things that a lot of testers were doing, because our organization had developers and testers, it was very common for developers to go make something and then pass it over to the tester and say, now you go test it. I'm going to go work on the next thing. And we knew that this was a crappy way to develop software, at least for us. So I don't want to say if it's working for you that it's wrong. It was crappy for us. And it was crappy because there was so much context switching. It was just ridiculous. Because what would happen like 95% of the time is you would be all done, say, hey, tester, go test this. And in like a second, the first thing they do it was broken. And they're like, well, why am I going to go test the rest of this if it's already broken? Or let me start clicking through and immediately it's like this common theme of this stuff being broken. And you're like, okay, like forget it. I'm going to go back and change this. So it was just ridiculously ineffective. And we got in the habit of finding ways where we could do a bit of the development together. So almost like not quite, but almost like a bit of pair programming around as we're building the feature. How are we planning to test it? Like, what are the scenarios we want to go walk through? And the evolution of this that I thought was so cool was that we got into a habit of writing coded tests for almost everything we could, to the point where I could work with this individual on my team and the other developers were doing the same thing. We talk about what we wanted to have tested in terms of use cases and stuff. And I could go to him and say, here are all the tests. They could check it in the code review. Here are all the tests for all the things we talked about. They all work. I can walk you through, and he will learn some of the code over time in the testing scenario. So this got easier and easier, but I can walk you through what these tests do so that you have confidence that those things we talked about are tested. They're covered. We should feel good about them. And this is, by the way, when you hear me talk about the purpose of tests is to build confidence, this is where it all comes from. So we would work together this way. And what started to happen was that there was so much confidence from both sides where he would start to look at the tests and go, oh, you forgot to add this one we talked about. Or now that I'm looking through this, I wonder, do we have a test that covers this other situation? And the other thing that we layered onto this was getting him builds very early so they wouldn't even be done. But if we had something that was compiling that he could start to use, when he had some downtime, he could start to click and try things out and just start to think like, if I go to use this feature, I know these things aren't done yet. Is there anything else I can think of? So we layered these things on together, but it ended up making it such that we could go write tests for so much stuff. And instead of having testers manually go click things, they ended up having a lot of confidence in what we were building up front. Now, this did involve an evolution of how we were testing stuff. So I haven't decided for sure. I'm going to be flying to, this is kind of cool actually. I'm going to be flying to Dallas on the 23rd of July. So this month, 23rd, I'm going to fly to Dallas and I'm going to give a talk, and I think I'm going to do it on this topic. It's between testing and plugins. But I want to talk about testing because we evolved how we test, how we write code to be testable, to literally being able to test user interfaces in code headless and being able to communicate that to our testers. Because we built up confidence from their testing role and our development role to be able to handle this. Hello, Rambling Geek. Good to see you back. I'm sorry that I'm just wrapping up my stream, but I was just letting people know that I'm going to be back on in the morning, hopefully 7 a.m. PST. That's my goal. I'll be coding. But to wrap this up on the quality side of things, the testing side of things, like I just bring it back to, in the example I just gave you, regardless if you're like, I don't want to go do things that way. That's fine. I'm not telling you that you have to go approach things that way. You might have a different team set up. That's totally fine. The thing that I'm trying to encourage you to do to bring it full circle is work with your team and continuously try to improve. You need to reflect, try things out, and do different experiments. Measure them, see what works, see what doesn't, and keep on going. So I hope that helps. I'm kind of glad that we came across this one at the end to kind of wrap things up. But that's why I think retrospectives are so important. So, thank you, folks. That's a pretty long one for today. I got to sleep. So I got to stream in the morning, right? I do appreciate it. If you have any thoughts or questions, please let me know. Send me a message. You probably noticed that I'm basically on every platform. So whatever you're comfortable being on, send me a message if you want to see other topics covered. I do want to start. I haven't figured out a good format for this. I want to be able to start doing code reviews. I might do it specifically for Discord community members, and that way it's a little bit easier to manage. So if you want to join the Discord community, you can check out my website. What's a good way to do this? One sec. It is a paid for community, by the way. This is how I give priority access to people. So this is a bit of a plug. But on the code reviews, I'm thinking I want to get people from the Discord community. I'm just putting it in the chat. I will get Discord community members if they want to share code. I can talk with them about what they're comfortable sharing and that kind of stuff. And then that way I can review it live. And my goal with that is that I don't want to like have people submit code and then we're like roasting the code. Like that's not productive at all. And I quite frankly think that would be kind of gross to do. I'm not a fan of that. I would love to be able to have Discord community members submit code and then I could review it like I was reviewing code at work. Right. So I might, if I'm streaming it, if they're on the stream, I could go ask them like, hey, like, what does this mean? Like, could we talk about it? I want to be able to go through code, offer some advice, and then demonstrate how to approach doing code reviews. So that's something else I want to kick off on some streams. But tomorrow morning will be code. We'll be in C#. I'm probably going to do some WPF stuff. Be doing a couple of WPF videos. It's funny. I've been getting direct feedback about the WPF videos. People really like them. They're like, thank you so much for doing this. But my views on them are abysmal. Like my channel is like tanking putting WPF videos up. So it's kind of crappy, but I still want to do some because I think they're valuable. And with that said, I have, I think, another 3 WPF videos already recorded. They should be going up over the next week and a bit. Hello there on Twitch. I'm just signing off, so sorry about that. I will be back on in another 8 hours or so. And no one likes process whether necessary or not. Hard sell. Yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky, but I think one of the ways that I lean into that is having the team come up with the process, right? I don't like enforcing it. All right, folks, I will be back on another 8 hours or so, and I'll be coding. So hope to see you there. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time, or in the morning or evening, depending where you are.